Hi, and welcome to the first skill development video. This video focuses on foundational information for the 4 specialized skills taught in this course. The foundational information that you will receive in this video comes under the heading of money and how to create it. If you're watching this video, it's because presently this part of the course needs to be delivered using recordings of previous skill building presentations. As you will soon see, the recording you are about to view consists of clips of in-class explanations that were recorded in a previous STEM in-person class session. The obvious drawback to using video that was not shot specifically for this purpose is that the quality is not the greatest, but we have tried to get the edits as clean as possible. However, the advantage we have over other distance methods is that we capture the action live. Each of these skill development videos follows a similar organization. Before each segment clip in the video is a short PowerPoint slide that explains the content of the segment that follows and the key points to be gained as you watch. In this video, there are 9 segments that have been clipped out of the previous class recording, and these contain the key information. The idea is for us to use the PowerPoint slide introductions and the clips to communicate the knowledge and understanding that will be needed for you to learn to master the foundational information needed for you to best utilize the remaining skill building videos. The core reason that this foundational information is so helpful is that it can be used as a starting point from which each skill development video begins. Here's the 10-point logic. 1, we have a technology. 2, presently it's on the shelf because its commercial value needs to be discovered. 3, in this course we focus on how to create commercial value. 4, commercial value shows up in the real world when a buyer purchases a product or service from a seller. 5, this sale is called by several names that in this course all mean the same thing. 6, these names include a transaction, a buy-sell exchange, and in technical terms, a new value unit. 7, so while there's inherent value in human relationships, new value units are not occurring because of harmful frictions in the economic system. 8, our objective is to identify the causes of these frictions, eliminate the causes, reduce the bad frictions, and enable the inherent value to emerge. 9, by using the skills taught in this course, you can learn how to structure this unstructured problem, thereby identifying the obstacles that need to be removed through using change plans, and thus reduce bad frictions and increase value units. 10, the foundation for this process is to understand what money really is, where it comes from, and how you personally contribute to creating it. So here's what you're going to see in this video. In this video, there are 9 segments of varying lengths. Approximately 105 minutes make up the clips with the core information in the video. Your goal as you watch is to watch the video to learn the key information, envision using the concepts discussed in your career, and apply the ideas you have learned to improving your understanding of commercialization. The 9 segments with their approximate lengths are: Segment 1, the origin of money; Segment 2, some terminology; Segment 3, the science of money; Segment 4, money as stored value; Segment 5, how to store value in money. Segment 6, sources of financing. Segment 7, the foundations of debt and equity financing. Segment 8, the yellow brick road of commercialization. Segment 9, a role play for raising equity. This is our total of 105 minutes. Let's look at segment 1. Get started. Segment 1, the origin of money, goes from the time codes that you see on your screen for 7 minutes. It summarizes the introduction to the course and today's topic in 3 parts. It explores the question, where does money come from? It explains how commercialization is a system and how the creation of money fits into that system. And it refers to a topic called learning choices, which is a recent survey of STEM MBA students that identifies the preferred learning styles that we have in our STEM program: logical, mathematical, often physical world, and spatial.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. I'm very glad to be here. I'm going to address something today that often isn't talked about. Nobody taught me that in business school, and kind of had to wait until I was doing consulting, and I had a client say, "Ron, where does money come from?" So, what do you think I told him?
Trees.
Grows on? Money grows on trees? Okay. Seriously. Where does money come from? How did it get here? Why is it here? What do you think? You can just take out your name kits if you don't have it. They're trying to learn names. Okay? Having to be a target, making your name up, so I'm sorry. We have 2 or 3 guests, 3 or 4 guests at the back. These are folks that I work with on various projects, and we've been having a discussion about where money comes from. I said, hey, I'm doing a class on that, so come on and see that. Okay, so just, if you don't mind till we get to know each other, the volunteering, the answer is always hard. So I'm not the football targeting, I get penalties. I'm not targeting, I'm just saying it's helpful to know how you think. So, like, Krista, where does money come from? Just whatever you think, right? Because I couldn't answer my client, I had to go think about it. But you're off the top of your head, money comes from?
Government.
Well, government, okay, so government's involved in creating money. Okay, I'm just going to put some of these. What comes from the government? Okay. Where's money come from? Cameron is moving back a little bit.
Sales.
Okay, so sales. Yeah, so Joyce is one of our guests. We met over at Innovation Hub. She was doing one of those. So innovator startup or something? Yeah, okay, so anyway, money comes from?
Finance market, with borrowers and receivers and lenders.
Finance markets. Okay, so there's the savers, create the big thing, and then the borrowers comes out of the great big bucket. Right? That's what we're talking about. Sterling, what do you think? Money comes from?
People, their value of objects.
Okay, so money comes from the value of objects. And I'm just going to put the 2 people, right? Because that's kind of what you were thinking, right? 2 people. Okay. So we've got some name reminding going on here. Hayden, that's right. Hayden, money comes from?
Banks.
Yeah, that was my answer. My answer for Troy says, Ron, where's money coming from? The bank. Okay, so banks. Well, are any of these wrong? No. Actually, they're all correct. They're all pieces of the where does money come from. It's actually a system. By the way, when you get to the learning choices thing, what we find is that almost everybody here is logical, mathematical, or formula-based. So if I talk about step-by-steps or systems, it's because that's the way that almost everybody here gets a piece of information and can use it. Okay? It becomes instantly available. What we're doing here is these are all parts of a system. So I'm just going to start through my answer to Troy. So Troy paid me money while I was in my doctorate. Troy paid me to go to the library and do some research to figure this out so that I could come here and say, here's where money comes from. Okay, so my next question, because a lot of us, you know, I mean, there's a book that says, right, so if we happen to be people of faith, money is the root of all evil. Okay, so there's that, right? And yet, okay, so is money good? Is trying to make money bad? No. So what's up with all of this, right? So we're in commercialization, and commercialization has a lot to do with pieces of this, right? So it's got value, and it's got sales, and it's got, well, actually, commercialization is going to do all of these things that we came up with have a part in a system. And since we're all logical, pretty much, and system thinkers, this talk today is just, it's supposed to be just kind of right in the sweet spot, in your wheelhouse, in the swim. Okay, so 4 things, I think. The science of money. Okay, guys, so you have never, have you ever heard science and money in the same like phrase, right? It's just like, what? Science and money? Okay, so science and money, sources of financing, okay, financing, equity financing examples, and debt financing examples.
In segment 2, we review some terminology for about 7 minutes. It provides a brief discussion of the terminology used in this class, primarily debt and equity. So in segment 2, we come to understand how these terms fit both into accounting, which you're taking concurrently with this class, and technology commercialization processes.
Right? Does anybody talk to you about the balance sheet? Okay, the balance sheet. Okay, so when a business runs, all the stuff that's happening on an ongoing basis, that's the income statement, right? And all the stuff that's stored that lasts from period to period, that's the balance sheet. Okay, so assets are sort of like unexpired costs. And we have this balance sheet thing. Okay, so the only reason I'm bringing this up is because everybody wants to see how it fits into the formula. So let's fit it into the formula. All right, so document camera. Okay, so we have a balance sheet. Okay, we have assets. Any minute now. So I think it's foggy in your mind. Okay, so balance sheet. Assets, liabilities plus owner's equity. And the assets go down here, they start with cash, and they go longer and longer term, right? That's basically. And on the other side, so this is called the identity equation, right? Assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. So there's liabilities, and then there's owner's equity. Now guess what equity is? So, of course it is. It's this thing. Okay, essentially what it is the people who invest the money in the business have like what's left over. And every time that the business makes a profit at the end of the year, that profit gets included in the equity and it grows. If you have a loss, the equity shrinks. Okay? So this is equity, and the liabilities, debt. So if you want to buy something, then you use either the equity that you've put in, Okay, so Krista and I started a business and we need a car. Okay? And I put in 20 grand and Krista puts in 20 grand and we buy ourselves a fancy Subaru. Okay? Okay, so the point is, it's out of equity that we bought the Subaru. And there's double entry accounting, right? So it's just like Subaru over here. And half of the Subaru is Krista's and half of it's mine. Or we could go to the bank and say, hey Karen, you be our banker, we're good for it. Loan us $40,000 please, and we'll buy the Subaru. And in that case, we financed it with debt. Okay, so that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about equity financing and debt financing. So everybody's heard about the stock market. That's the equity financing crowd. The bond market, that's the debt financing crowd. Even the car loan that we would take out is a kind of a bond, okay? It's just a loanish, kind of a loan thing. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is to talk about how we commercialize by getting the money that we need to do all these things, sales and create value for people, etc. Okay, so those are the four things that we'll talk about today. First of all, the science of money. Where does money come from? Then, where does financing come from? And it will be both debt and equity, and I'll tell you how to classify that so that what you get is so this is for all of us who are logical and who are who like to see everything in the formula in the system. This is going to show you a place for all the things we've heard about in an underlying system. And it can be useful for a lot of the courses that you'll take, the finance course and the strategy course, etc. Okay? Certainly your accounting courses. Okay, so anybody want a clarification before I just rock on forward? All right, so science and money. Okay, so many people who want to commercialize, prospective entrepreneurs, believe that all you need is the money and you can have a venture success. All I get is the money, I'll just raise the money and I'll have a success. And I can't really start until I get the money. Is that really true?
Segment 3 is a 15-minute segment that uses a thought experiment, which is kind of a hypothetical example. Gertrude the Golden Goose, to illustrate 2 points. Number 1, that the creation of money is inherently social. And 2, how the creation of value leads to the creation of money. So through segment 3, we come to see from this hypothetical example that the key question in financing commercialization is, do you have Gertrude? That is, can you show you have value?
Well, let me introduce you to, okay, how's everybody at imaginary? Let's just create an imaginary goose sitting right next to Brady. Okay, her name's Gertrude. It was really embarrassing the year that I talked about Gertrude and there wasn't Gertrude in the room and I didn't know it. Anyway, Gertrude, the golden goose, right here. Okay, so since I started talking, okay, so about every 6 minutes, okay, so 10 times an hour, because there's 12 minutes after, okay, so about 18 minutes after. I'll say, so Gertrude's going honk, 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 clunk, and out came a golden egg, 1 troy ounce of pure gold, probably $1,200, $1,300 a piece. Okay, we got 3 of them, okay, since we started. Okay, so probably $4 grand worth of gold sitting right here. Remember now, Gertrude, just imaginary, so don't stick me up for the gold. But the gold's here, imaginarily, okay? Okay, so here we are, Gertrude. And as we go through our 2-hour class, turns out that each hour we get 10 of these things. 12,500 and 12,500. And by the end of the class, we've got $25,000 worth of gold sitting here. With me so far, right? Okay, so. Elliot, all I need for you to have 1/20th, let's just say, of Gertrude, your share, okay, $25,000, so 10%, so $1,250 worth right now at the end of class. Okay, and all I need from you is $1. Would you put that $1 on the table and invest in Gertrude? Okay, Jeffrey, how about you? $1? Anybody here wouldn't put $1 in for 1/20th of Gertrude? No, no, no. All right, how about $5? Yeah. How about $10? Yeah, okay, so. Now, the thing that you don't know about Gertrude is that Gertrude is relatively young. And the lifespan of golden geese is at least 10 years. Every hour, every 2 hours, okay, we get $25,000. Okay, so you get the share of Gertrude, but you get your share for the whole life of Gertrude. 10 years, every 2 hours, 25 grand. Okay, so this is, you gotta be in the, pretend it's real, okay? Anybody here would have a problem getting $1,000 to buy your share of Gertrude for the rest of her life. Now, how many $10,000? Well, you might call up Aunt Sally just to get it, right? Because it's Gertrude. The golden eggs are piling up. We watch them. Well, okay. So what about this premise? Many entrepreneurs believe that they got to increase the resources to launch and operate a new venture. Look, that really isn't the issue. The issue is your new product, because we're going to commercialize an invention into a product, which somebody can turn into a venture or an organization. By the time you're done with your STEM, you'll be pretty close to identifying how we'll make the sales that lead to the collection of the money. So the big issue, guys, isn't can you raise the money? It's only, do you have Gertrude? That's it. Everyone wants to know, is this a golden goose? Great, I'll invest the money. Not a golden goose? Huh, see you later. Nice talking to you. Nice looking bird, but no thanks. Okay, so you see what the deal is? The deal is it's all about proving to the people who have money. And then sometimes in class I've asked people to put up their hands, how much money you could raise for a Gertrude. And generally in class, about 20 people, it's between $5 and $7 million you could actually put your hand on if you're mortgaging the ranch and selling your car, whatever. The point is, it's not an issue about money. It's just an issue of, do you have Gertrude? Okay, so what we do when we talk about technology and commercialization is we try and reduce all the uncertainties about, now we had a big thing on Wednesday, right, the introduction of where the uncertainties come from, and we'll use that. But the real uncertainty is about, do you have Gertrude? And so we'll use some skills. They'll just be the skills for us to create a product from an invention. But we'll use those skills to give us a better and better and better probability that we can prove to others. So that panel will sit here. Yeah. I mean, you'll know before you stand up here to give your presentation if you've got Gertrude and why. And then they'll know it. So that's kind of a mistake on the part of most people when they think about commercialization. Entrepreneurs are one kind of commercialization, but companies do it. And obviously Texas Tech does it. But I use entrepreneurs because they're the ones who are involved in this bit, value of objects to people. That's Sterling, was that? Yeah, okay, so Sterling, third contribution, okay. So that's why I'm saying it's an incomplete understanding, guys. Okay? The objective is to understand then how the creation of value, okay, so you didn't have to have anybody tell you gold is really worth a lot, right? But because we all understand that's value. But the idea is to understand how the creation of value leads to the creation of money. Okay, so this is what I found when I was working for Troy, trying to answer his question, hey Ron, where does money come from? So that little triple line between money and society, that's the equivalent sign that all of us who've taken math understand, right? So equivalence would be, without money, there'd be no society. Without society, there'd be no money. That's Aristotle. I mean, big deal, right? Yeah, pretty good philosopher, not so great at chemistry, right? 4 elements, earth, wind, fire, and water. 4 elements. Aristotle's periodic table of oops. Okay, so, like, he wasn't really good at everything. And this, it's up to you now to figure out, was Aristotle good at this? Without society, there'd be no money. Without money, there'd be no society. Emma, what do you think? Was Aristotle right about half of it, all of it, or none of it? Half of it, yeah. So which half was Aristotle right about? Without society, there'd be no money. Because we know that we can have a society that can be trading seashells, right? Now, and maybe they're valuable stuff, but they're not money the way that we define money, which is going to happen soon. Okay, but let's just look at the reason why without society there'd be no money. So right over here I have 2 volunteers to not be members of society. They're inanimate. So they're kind of like geological things. They don't talk back. They don't even talk to each other. They just sit there. Now imagine some very foolish thing that one on the left says to one on the right, hey, you want to buy, I don't know, extra padding? And one on the right says, yeah, I don't think so. So that's not going to happen, right? There's no society. They're just inanimate. They're just things. So the first principle that we're going to learn here is that money is contingent upon people, social things. Money actually deals with the part of the world that I was talking about in that little video on Wednesday, which basically says there's this whole social side that has an underlying order to it, the same way mechanical engineering stuff or geoscience or life science. We study these underlying orders because they help us to diagnose an illness or figure out a computer program or etc., right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the underlying structure, right? A logical, formula-based, how the heck stuff works in the social side as a foundation for all the rest of the courses, as we were saying on Wednesday. Okay, so social. We're all good with that? Everybody says, yeah, you gotta have people that have money. Little old mini society over there is bogus. Not gonna happen. All right, so remember this Del Mar guy? So he's the one who quoted Aristotle. Okay, but here's the logic for where money comes from and why it's social. Okay, so it starts getting abstract, guys. So STEM people can handle abstract really well. Okay, it's just social abstract. And so, but the words connecting actually have this underlying structure. So in the isolated state, that's Ron by himself, okay? Our wants exceed our powers. So, over the break, Dr. Mitchell and Mrs. Mitchell had a new grandson in California. And we're going to go out and see him. So, we stand out in our driveway and we start to fly. Flapping our arms, running around. Oops. Why these stupid examples? Because, like, we're bodily kinesthetic. We like to kick the tire. We want to know I'm just saying Ron flapping his arms is not gonna fly to California, period. Right, that's all it means. But there's an airline called Southwest, and they buy Boeing jets. Okay, yeah, all the 737 Maxes are on the ground, but they have Boeing jets. Okay, there's the Lubbock International Airport, there's a TSA, there's fuel, there's all kinds of cool stuff. And for just like a few $100, I can do, somebody's gonna get an airplane ticket, and I just sit down, put in my ultimate ears, right, my headphones, crank on the tunes, and pretty soon, I'm at LAX or Burbank, wherever it is we're going. So, in the isolated states, my wants exceed my powers. Ron can't fly. Okay? That's represented by individual wants, great big individual powers, not so much. Every one of us are in the same situation. Our wants exceed our powers. Okay? But in the social state, societal powers exceed individual wants. Right? We got like Southwest Airlines. Okay, so what's Southwest Airlines? It's just a bunch of people. They got together to create value, objects, plane tickets for people. Oh, great. Where did they get the money? Well, they got it from financial markets, from savers, right? How do they keep it? They get some sales. How do we are sure that the money doesn't... Okay, so when money drains out, right, you're holding money, but it becomes worth less and less, that's called inflation, right? If we have hard currency, that means it's not gonna leak out. So there's the government, right? Let's put it in the bank. So all these guys, this is how you guys our understanding of money actually plays out. Wants are greater than our powers, but our societal powers are greater than our wants. And actually, what's an entrepreneur but somebody that assembles the societal powers to satisfy some set of individual wants? They make iPhones, they make clickers, they make all kinds of stuff so that they can just go magically. See? But it's really this.
Segment 4 talks about money as stored value, demonstrating that money is really stored value. That is to say, potential energy, only it's potential economic, not physical energy. We make 3 points: the idea of the value reservoir, the role of the Federal Reserve Bank in the economy, and the meaning of hard currency. Through segment 4, we can envision the concept of money in a new way, one that's useful to appreciating the usefulness of skills taught in this class.
We're all good so far, right? Where's money coming from? Well, you can notice, even though it's visual, that there's an inequality. Value creation occurs when we create relationships that use the inequality between the powers of individuals and the powers of society. Okay, so you set up an inequality. What does an inequality look like in physical terms? Emma, being the geo person, you just, we're going to rely on you all semester long. I'm kidding you, kind of. But when we build, let's just say we build a dam. Let's just say Boulder Dam down in the Lake Mead that's, outside Las Vegas. And Lake Mead's out behind it, right? And then way down below, there's this generator, right? And it's just, if we release the water, gravity pulls the water through the generator, and we get energy. So, what is Lake Mead? Lake Mead is stored energy. Oh, yes, we scientists call it potential energy, but okay, so it's inequality, okay? So a successful transaction, we're going to talk a lot about those, but that really means it's an economic relationship that uses the inequality. The wants that are greater than the powers for individuals, the powers that are greater than the individual wants, and the economic relationships that transfer those. So, let's just say Brady and I figure out how we're going to make something really cool. Like, if you're carrying your iPhone and you say 3 magic words that your iPhone can hear, you can levitate up to 3 feet above the ground. Brady and I just figured that out. Okay, so we've got this really cool, I mean, it's powers, right, of society. All right, so what we need you to do is to buy it. What you gonna buy it with, Katie? Money. Okay, so why would we take your money? Because it is the stored value that you did working your job, and you did working your job, I did. Southwest takes my money because I just basically have my little white bead that I just all stored. See, and that's how the inequality works. You just release some of the stored energy into the system, and out flows electricity or money. Okay, so where's money coming from? It's coming from this fundamental inequality. It's social, not inanimate, and it's based upon who has what powers. And any society that continues to do really cool stuff like our iPhone levitator, well, I'm sorry to tell you, it really doesn't work, and we're not going to take your money because it'd be a scam. But stuff that is of value, people provide money because they stored it up. Why did they store it up? Well, we've got to say, how does it get stored? Right? That's the next thing, right? Because if money is stored value, then what we have to do is to figure out how we get the value into the money. So, I have here 2 pieces of paper. Okay. Okay, Matthew, this is you and me. I have 2 pieces of paper, unused. 2 pieces of paper. Which one do you want? He doesn't have the sniffles, so. Okay, he wants this one. Okay. Could you just tell us a little bit about why you want this one, Matthew? It looks more valuable. So, isn't that interesting? I can leave these in front of those chairs, they don't care. But it looks more valuable. What is it about this thing that makes it look more valuable? Trent, why does this look more valuable than this? Well, just look at it closely. What does it say on it? It says $1. What else does it say? United States of America. Keep going. Federal Reserve note. This is Federal Reserve. Well, actually, so this is a question on the quiz, and remember, there's one following this class that goes dead, 11:59, tomorrow night, kinds of. But the point is, the Federal Reserve isn't actually the government. It's some entity that's separate from the government that actually runs the reservoir. See, I didn't know that when I was doing this thing for Troy, so it's not like everybody should know that the Federal Reserve is sort of like a Dairy Queen, except it's not ice cream and chocolate, it's these things, Federal Reserve notes. And basically it says, Ron, you can store your teaching value in one of these things, and anytime you want to, so, Jeffrey, I need a piece of your paper, would you? This is all hypothetical, you don't actually have to do it. Would you rip one of your pieces of paper out and I'll give you this? And Jeffrey would say, sure. Why? Because this paper is prettier than that paper, using the Matthew standard. Fine, it's prettier because it says, in God we trust. It says, the Great Seal. It says, so there's all kinds of symbols on here that aren't on here. This symbol said stored value. This symbol says help you with the sniffles, but that's about it. See, so more valuable. Okay, so, and Why does this even exist? Because there's that inequality. The reservoir is there, and anytime the reservoir needs to be filled, Trent, who's going to fill the reservoir for us? The Federal Reserve. It's not going to be ice cream cones, it's going to be these babies. They're going to authorize the mint to run the presses to do what? To store the value that Dr. Mitchell created by doing a class for somebody who wants a STEM MBA. Or that Brady and Ron do, making our iPhone levitator work. Okay, so symbols on some, I mean, there are other symbols, I brought it. Okay, so you're gonna have to look at these closely. Okay, so. Okay, Caleb, have I picked on you yet? Okay, so these are pieces of metal instead of Kleenexes and paper, okay? This is a US quarter, and this is, you ever been to Canada?
No, I haven't been to Canada.
You haven't? Okay, this is a $1 coin called a loonie, because there's a loonie. Okay? A $1 coin. Canadian dollars trading at about 75 cents US. Okay? So which one do you want? You're going to take the loonie, even though he has to go to a bank and talk them into giving him 3 of these, he'd still rather take it. Now why? Because it's got some symbols on it that say Canada, dollar. Well, look at the Queen. I mean, dang, right? Okay, but the point is, it's a hard currency too. It doesn't leak. The US dollar doesn't leak. But you know, like Venezuela's having terrible trouble. If somebody gives a Venezuelan $1 million Venezuela bill right here, Caleb's already shaking his head. I don't think so. Okay, so the point is, it's just something that we put some symbols on, like metal or paper or whatever, and the symbols make it look good, in the sense that it's good, that it's really a it's a storage entity for money. It's at any time we want to be sure that there's enough money around to store the value that's created. Why is the US so rich? Well, let's talk about how we actually get the money.
Segment 5, well, how do you store value in money? This segment demonstrates exactly what is stored in the economic reservoir, now known as money: productivity and trust. Through segment 5, we can see described for us how the social activities that are economic produce the value that can be stored as money, and we use the term monetized to label this process.
Developing relationships requires 2 things. So this is what's actually stored: productivity and trust. Now, I've given examples of both. Right? Productivity was Dr. Mitchell teaches a class and Texas Tech pays. So I don't spend everything, so I have an extra dollar to use as a... The point is, there's productivity. I did something. And so I created some value and I stored it. But why do you think trust matters? Bryce, what? Productivity side. I'm putting stuff into the reservoir, right? So I've got these dollars. But for it to really be money, why do we have to have trust?
Because trust that it's the right value, you actually get it.
So it has to have the right value, and to me the right value is when I put $1 worth of effort, productivity into that reservoir, I get $1 back out. What happens if there's no trust? It leaks. The reservoir is just less and less. It's like those Venezuelan notes. Okay, it's called inflation or whatever it is. But basically you need both parts. So money is storage in a reservoir that you can tell it's there because of the symbols that are on the, whatever it is, object, like the metal or the paper. Okay? And you have a pretty good reason to say it's going to be, according to Bryce, right. Meaning the money in is going to be the money coming out. I can trust it. Okay, just a little bit about each one of those. Productivity, the basis for productivity is specialization. If all everybody here could do would be dig ditches, there would be tons of ditches, but it wouldn't be a really high-value society because all kinds of things are needed, and all we're doing is ditch digging. There's just a lot of value, a lot of products and services that we really like that we can't get from a bunch of ditch diggers. So if you're, so to speak, a community that can only dig ditches, how high is your productivity? Not so much. But if you can do all kinds of cool stuff, then you have high productivity, okay? This level of specialization indicates its capability for value creation. Specialists can be more efficient, okay? So all of us engineers know efficiency is something in, converted to something out with little waste. Effective means, well, it's actually the right thing. So if you define it, efficiency is doing things right, effectiveness is doing the right things. And both of them together create productivity. Anybody want more explanation of that? I mean, these are all kind of newer concepts, but they're the management and social concepts that underlie why there's money. So I get that it's a little early to put Doc Mitchell on the ropes and ask him hard questions, but don't hesitate. I could really love it if you did. Okay, so just plant that idea. So trust among human beings really begins on a case-by-case basis. Okay, frankly, if I sent you all an email and said, hi, technology commercialization, we're going to meet at the bus depot in Lubbock at 12 o'clock on Friday, well, you'd go, oh, what? But Texas Tech, STEM MBA, well, suddenly you see, you're already trusting that Texas Tech's got this. And we do, okay, but the point is, case by case, Dr. Mitchell inviting you to the bus depot to talk about commercialization isn't gonna fly. Trust happens then on a wasteful basis if you don't have all of the high performance things that societies have. We call them institutions, but it's like the common understanding. So when I said gold, nobody thought, what's that? When I said money, nobody thought, what's that? Those are all institutions. They're common understandings of what's valuable. And they're based on laws and rights and all this stuff, okay? So if a society is highly productive, but you can't trust the storage, then what does it turn into? It turns into a situation where you kind of don't have money working because the trust isn't there, and poverty is the result. So if I'm living in a village in central, let's just say, fourth tier economy, and I have 3 pigs, and I want 12 sacks of grain, I can go down to the market with my pigs, trade them for the 12 sacks of grain, and come back. No problem. But if the institutions in that society, like, do we trust each other? And I say to somebody, person X, so take my 3 pigs down to the market, get the 12 sacks of grain, keep one of them for yourself, and bring the other 11 back. What would happen in a low-trust society? I'd say goodbye to my pigs, and I'd never say hello to 11 sacks of grain. So, and what would happen as a result? Everybody loses. That's kind of what the poverty thing is.
Segment 6 puts us in a position where we're now ready to see why the sources of financing work the way that they do. The two important issues are cost of financing and control. So through segment 6, we can see how to categorize financing from low cost, low outside control to high cost, high outside control using a diagram to place each type of financing according to these criteria.
I promised you that we'd organize then the sources of finance. So there are lots of ways to organize this, but two really effective ones are how much does it cost to actually get access to this remember, I think we had the savers and the borrowers, for example. How much does it cost to get access to what the savers put in? Because now we know what savers create are reservoirs, right? And the reservoir is maintained by the Fed. So then we have the borrowers or whatever, right? So sometimes it costs a lot to follow this trail. Sometimes it doesn't cost much. So the relative financing cost can be low or high, just like we have on this, okay? However, there's something called control. What control means is, can somebody else tell you what to do? Okay, so, who have we picked on yet? So, it's Amanda. It's really smart. Okay, so Amanda, your turn. Okay, so if you need to buy a car from me and I give you the car, okay, and you promise to pay me, okay, and of course, usually it's the car is the collateral, the collateral is, right? She doesn't pay me, I get the car back. But what if instead I said, yeah, you want the car, yeah, we'll have the car as collateral, and we'll have all your furniture and all of your sports equipment, and we'll have a mortgage on your parents' house, and we'll have, suddenly man is going, no, that's just way too much control I'm giving you as the lender. So that's what control is. A lot of chance to get your stuff, okay? Or in a business, if we're investing, remember Krista and I were going to put 50-50 in to get the car. She was putting 20 grand in and I was putting 20 grand in. Okay, so we're 50-50. Okay, but let's just say Ron wanted the business really, really, really badly. And so what happened is Krista said to Ron, yeah, I know you're going to put in the $20,000, but that's only for a quarter of the company. I'm taking 75%. And because I really, really want to have the car and the business, I agree to that. What's happened to the control of the business? It went to Krista. All of this stuff is negotiated. It's just people talking to people, right? Remember these guys, they're not involved. Okay. So, loss of control, which is that one, low loss, high loss, and financing cost, low or high. Okay, so if we're getting investments in our business so that we can buy the assets to create value for people, I am looking back at my really ugly diagram here, right? Then we have either debt or we have equity that's going to pay for all of these assets. Making sense, right? Okay, so here's where the money comes from then, if you want debt or equity. Nope, that went the wrong way. Okay, so low cost and low loss of control. Okay, so Joyce is with us, she has a business, she pitched at Red Raider Startup. So the way that it costs her very little to start her business is she uses her own money, nobody's second in control, and this little link from Savers, that's Joyous talking to herself, right? So, no issue there. Okay, government programs, we call those grants. So we come up with a grant. Here, Elliot, you don't pay me back. You don't have to tell me about it. Just, you look like a good guy and you got great ideas. Here you go. Okay? Sorry. Suppliers and trade credit. It means, Kristen and I need the car, and we go to the Sterling Drake car dealership and say, could we, we'll get the loan, but can we borrow the car for a month? Because we need it right now. Sterling being a good guy says, yeah, okay. So low cost, low loss of control, right? It's just a supplier of a car saying, okie dokie. Okay, so everybody clear? That's kind of where that comes from. Now, we have the high cost with low loss of control. So the interesting thing about that, guys, is that commercial banks were asset-based lenders. Remember, we were going to buy a car and we were going to use the car as the collateral? That's an asset-based loan, okay? So a bank loan or like a car loan, those things are fundamentally low loss of control and low financing cost. Now comes the low financing cost, but a high loss of control. So, you've heard of the term IPO, you know, like somebody's going initial public offering, they take the company public. Well, what does that mean? It means the people who own the company don't own it anymore, or they don't own a piece of it, somebody else does, they own the shares. That equity piece starts including a whole bunch of other people. And if all those shares have votes, pretty soon you don't have control. So it doesn't cost relatively a lot to raise that money, but there is a big loss of control. As a matter of fact, there are, I'm going to call them the laws of financing, the social rationale. And basically, if you put money into a business as an investor and you don't get control, they're either related to you or you got rocks in your head. Because you gotta control what happens to the money. Okay, so, and here's the high cost and high loss of control. You've always all heard the term the vulture capitalist, venture capital. They want double their money in 2 to 5 years. High loss of control and high cost. Okay? And a merchant bank, just so you know, you've heard of like Barclays. So all these guys that sprung up back in the trading days when you'd send a ship around the Horn of Africa to Indonesia to get the spices, who financed that? It's like the merchant banks. They owned the ship and the captain and everything. And basically you were working for those bankers. Sometimes you'd lose the ship. It's high risk. But they kept doing it because most of the ships made it back. Okay, so we good on where the money comes from. It's not the only places, but that's a good enough look to say which ones are the debt ones. Can you tell it? Can we just what we're doing there? Okay. So in the first one, self-financing, debt or equity? Trick question. Neither. Okay. Government program, debt or equity? Yeah, sorry. Trick question. Neither. Okay. Suppliers or trade credit? Debt. Okay. Commercial banks? Debt. Asset-based lenders? Debt. Public equity offering? Equity. Venture capital? That's equity. The merchant bank has debt secured by everything you, like I was gonna talk about Amanda having to get, yeah, basically everything you had, those merchant bankers would tie up. So it's debt with a big kick in the head, equity with a big kick in the head. Just saying. Okay. So are we good on where the money's coming from? We know why it exists, because we're storing value. We're knowing that now how we get it from the savers who have something in their reservoir. Some of it's high cost, some of it's low cost, some of it's high loss of control, some of it's low loss of control. So, we're good. We're on solid ground. Right? Why are we doing this? Because we're going to commercialize. And we have to figure out how, when we create value for people, here's one of our new words, we can monetize it. What's that really mean? It means we can take what's in the reservoir and run it through the generator, and what comes out is a certain kind of energy we'll call money. Monetize. Take what's in the reservoir, turn it into money. Okay, so I hope this is intuitively satisfying, because most everybody here wants to hear the logic and then want to see how it fits an overall system, okay? And I haven't departed from that. This is systematic and it's logical.
In segment 7, it's then time to explain the underlying system, the social assumptions that are the foundation for all debt or equity financing decisions, the social assumptions for debt and the social assumptions for equity. Through segment 7, we can see the underlying logic for why people act the way they do when they borrow or lend money, which is debt, or receive or provide money for ownership of a business opportunity, which is equity finance.
I told you there would be social assumptions. Why do we need the social assumptions? Because this is the underlying logic why everything works when it comes to monetizing. Translated, commercializing. These are the laws. And they don't get taught, they certainly weren't taught to me in business school. But to me, if you guys are just trusting us, coming here with your STEM genius and saying, okay, I want to figure out that social thing so that I can make sure that the value I create can be turned into money, I gotta solve the 3 big uncertainties: information, relation, and resource uncertainty. How am I gonna do it? Well, I'm gonna do the resource uncertainty by commercializing, turning something to money. Oh, what's the underlying logic? So all us logical people would say, it depends on the assumptions. All right, let's talk about the assumptions. So, debt, the assumption is money back plus interest. Okay, so I'm borrowing money from Brady. Brady, I borrowed $1,000, 10% interest yearly, and come a year from now, I pay you $1,100. Money back plus interest. Okay? Equity, however, oh, Cameron, I gotta have you invest in my venture. So I need that $1,000. But it's not gonna be a debt, it's gonna be, you're gonna get voting control of my venture. Okay? It's gonna be equity. The thing that Cameron will say is, great, Ron, except that it's not money back plus interest. So guys, don't ever make this mistake. This is how you keep this straight, right? So you've heard in mathematics the commutative property and the associative property. Okay, so debt is commutative. It has the plus sign. Many times my money has the multiplication sign. So Cameron wants a multiple. He doesn't want the $1,000 back. He wants 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000. 1,100 versus 3,000. Huh, that's what's going on. Well, how does Brady ensure that Ron pays the $1,100 to him in a year? Okay? Well, for debt, he takes some collateral. So basically he looks at my, let's just say it's my Mac computer, okay, which I paid $2,265 for. And he says, Ron, you're going to sign over the title to that if you don't pay. And there's something, and you can just take this down, it's not ever going to be on a test, but to be business people, you need to know there's something called a UCC, Uniform Commercial Credit Form 1. UCC 1, Brady makes me sign it. Basically says he gets my computer if I don't pay the money back. Okay? Collateral. Got that? We got that. Now Cameron, however, says, don't give me this bogus stuff about, like, forget your back. Now, I want your company. Frankly, Ron, you don't give me many times my money. I want to have my hands on the yellow handle, which when I pull it, out you go, and I go get Joyous to come and run the place. Because she'll get me many times my money. So you get collateral, Brady. Cameron gets control. Okay? Why? Because he only has a plus sign to deal with. So there's a limited. This is unlimited expectation. And to be sure that Cameron gets what he signed up for, according to these social assumptions, he needs control. Ron, you can't pull it off? Well, dang, we'll get somebody you can. We'll get Jeffrey. So, underlying social assumptions. Okay? And it works both ways. Okay, so the investor says, I'm not going to invest unless I get control if I need it. That's what Cameron says. Okay? And I say, I'm with you, Cameron. Like, I'm not going to give up control on this. We got a pretty good shot at making a multiple. Many times our money. See, that's why people do IPOs. They want the multiple. Okay? And the debt, the lender says, yeah, Brady says, I'm not going to lend you unless I can get your stuff. UCC1. The entrepreneur says, I'm only going to sign up for collateral that I'm willing to lose. Do you remember? Man that said, no way on this unlimited collateral thing. But the Mac computer, yeah, okay. It's gone, too bad. So most bankers will take the computer, sell it for $1,500, take the $1,100, and give you the $400 back. They may not have to. Just saying. Okay, so how? Because, all right, now this is you commercialize. Okay, so Elliot, how? Because Elliot got up in the morning and decided to commercialize. Can he make the money presses run longer? So this is one where Elliot is offering to be our example, but he doesn't have to answer the question. We're going to answer the question. Okay, Elliot gets up in the morning and he commercializes. He actually creates some value for people through sales. And because of that, how can he make the money presses run longer?
Segment 8 now gives us the flow chart for the commercialization system. I've termed it the yellow brick road because I use yellow highlighting on the diagram. This segment introduces the complete commercialization system in two parts. The yellow brick road, that is the assembly line diagram that illustrates all the steps from choosing a technology to the printing of money, and the functions of the Federal Reserve Bank, how the money actually gets into the economy. Through segment 8, we can see how the 4 skills taught in this class fit into the technology commercialization system.
Well, guys, there's actually an underlying, wait for it, system. Okay, so there's the objective. The presses are going to run longer because Elliot got up in the morning and decided to commercialize. Well, let's just look at what happened right before that. Okay. Decided to commercialize, which is we're going to choose a technology. We haven't done that yet. Some of you looked over those technologies yet? Is there anything that looks, are they too bioscience for you? The reason why they're limited, so Jeffrey and I were having that conversation last night, they're limited because we got to have an inventor who's willing to talk to us and to work with us, etc. And not all of the time do these, it's not the inventors are harsh people, they just sometimes are so busy they can't. So Mr. McClure has gone and talked to 5 inventors and they're all sitting there waiting to have our help. Okay, so if anybody has a concern that there's just nothing in these technologies, remember how to get to them, right? You just go into Blackboard and hit there's 1 through 22, and there's a folder for every single class of what's gonna go on. Those technologies are in that class for next Wednesday. Okay, so just look at them. And we got MLK Day on Monday, but if you have heartburn, there's nothing there for you. It's not gonna affect your grade, it may in fact improve it if you say, there's nothing here for me, I'm an ME and I need something that goes word and click. Not putting anybody down, I'm just saying, people who do mechanical understand how that works. And I don't see a ton of mechanical in those inventions. There's some aspects, right? But if you have heartburn, I need to know it because this is the front end. We choose a technology. You guys will, okay? You will tell me, because I'm gonna have one chance, and that's Tuesday, to call up David McClure and say, David, any inventor that we can put this moment? So I'd be willing to try and pull that off if there's something there that you couldn't live with. Just saying. Okay, so choose a technology, and then you create new value. Like I said, we know that's value of objects. Okay, so this is our new shorthand. We are going to call an exchange where you create a product for somebody else and they pay us money. Okay? That's an exchange. And what's the value? They get a product that's worth more to them than the money, and you get the money. So everybody benefits. Right? And every time there's an exchange, so I buy one piece of paper from Jeffrey, and then I buy another piece of paper, and another piece of paper, for $1 each, but 3 different times. That would be 3 value units, 3 exchanges, 3 transactions. So the way that you get to the presses running longer is that you create new sales. So, let's just look at the synonyms here. Everything, for this class, things are going to mean the same when it comes to units are the same as transactions or exchanges, okay, which are the same as sales. Now sales, you know, has units times price. And you're going to take an economics class that'll talk about price theory. So the price is kind of not what we're talking about when we commercialize. We're talking about units, new value units. But they show up as sales. How many sales did Jeffrey have? 3. Okay? Just saying, these are the basics, and so that's how business happens. And it's like, I'll explain how we build on the foundation of all of these ideas as we go, systematically and logically. Okay? But I'm just planting these ideas in your mind so that they become part of the system, which when we connect up all the parts, the light comes on. So power it up, it works. Okay, so when we say new value units, we mean new transactions, we mean new exchanges, we mean new sales. When we say sales, we mean new transactions, when we say new exchanges, we mean units, so they are interchangeable. The easiest way to talk about it to people who are business people is sales. But underlying it, there are these units because when you make a sale, It's one piece of paper times $1 equals $1. But we're not gonna do price theory. Economics is gonna do price theory. And you guys haven't started your economics thing yet, right? Okay. There's like I think it's a distance deal that we do for economics. Part of my job as the integrated project coordinator is to be sure that pretty much all of the courses and their objectives are laid out this semester so that you can know what to anticipate, where all the pieces are gonna all click together. Once again, your huge advantage is that you're mainly logical, mathematical, and you're mainly formula system thinkers. And there are a few that are like spatial, but spatial people can do any of that stuff. And almost everybody's bodily kinesthetic, or a whole ton of us, which means, just prove it to us with our senses. So this is an ideal setup for us to look at all the pieces the way they're going to assemble over your whole STEM, and the integrated project will just draw from all these courses more and more and more as you go. Okay, so a little bit of a digression there, but I only did that because there's a connection that I didn't want you to miss. Okay, so backing up, Elliot gets up in the morning and decides he's gonna commercialize. Well, what's he gonna do? Oh, he'll choose a technology. Then he's going to figure out how to create new value units, which can be new value. Okay, so this is sound off, please. New value units means new value sales, means new value exchanges, means new transactions. Okay? You create those things. It's really one thing called 4 different names. Okay? Why is it called 4 different names? It's just that's the way it works in a social world where not everybody has the same mind. And so for me to just say one thing and not tell you that these things all mean the same, that's just not fair to your thinking. Okay, so just saying, that's why we went through that, let's sound off. Okay? So there's something called the transaction solutions matrix. It's the 4th skill. We're not going to talk about it much. I'll give you an introduction probably on Wednesday, just before we go through the technologies. Okay? So, how do we get to the presses running longer? Well, Elliot chose a technology, he figured out how to create new value units, and out of that he can create a net cash flow. Now frankly, that's beyond the scope of this class. It's beyond the scope of the second class. It's actually in Dr. Fish's class where you start talking about how the sales turn into money. But that's where that skill comes in. So, I guess what you just figured out is, that's what this class is about, okay? And after that, you create a net cash flow. And net cash flow comes from 3 sources. Either you sell the product or service, or you do this debt or equity thing, right? Flow of money comes from sales, banks, rating of a bank, or equity, capital investor, right? And that creates cash flow. Interesting thing about those elements is the only one that's sustainable is the sales. Because you can't give many times my money. You can't pay back the 1,100 without the first one. So these are temporary relative to this one, which is much more permanent. Everybody okay with that? Just like, the deal is sales. But you can have the temporary way to get to sales by getting an investor or by borrowing money. But the only purpose of that is to get you to sales. So that's where the sustain part comes in. Okay? So you create net cash flow, which turns into, actually supports currency. What do I mean by that? Well, we've got a reservoir, right? Remember the reservoir? The reservoir stores the value. Well, how do we know that the value is stored and not leaking? Well, we have one of these things that has all the symbols on it. It's a hard currency. Well, where do we get that from? Well, we get that from the Federal Reserve. Okay, so this next concept is on every quiz I'm going to offer you. Because when you know this, you know more about how the economy works than most everybody. So I'm going to just take a minute and walk you through it. Okay? So monetary policy. Quick terminology. Remember we had the government doing something? What does the government do for us? Well, yeah, go ahead, Bryce, please.
Keep it from leaking.
They keep it from leaking. So government has two policies, actually. It has fiscal policy and monetary policy. Fiscal policy is the budget, how much the government spends to run the country. And our fiscal policy basically is spend more than we take in taxes and borrow the rest. But that's the government budget. It's not part of what we do in this class. Oh, so we're talking about monetary policy. Monetary policy, as Bryce really said, is keep it from leaking. And to be sure that, as we all get up in the morning and create value, there's enough of those symbols floating around out there to cover every bit of value that we created. And we know that there's enough because we have a stable currency, not much inflation. No deflation, no inflation. It's just, was it you, Bryce, who said right? It's just right. Right? You put the money in, you can get it out. It's right. Okay, so how does the Federal Reserve actually get the currency, or the dollars, into and out of the economy? Well, okay. So they have three ways to do it. They are reserve requirement, discount rate, and open market operations. And this is gonna take, I'm gonna push your STEM minds pretty hard for this, because it's not like I made it up, but it's actually what happens. And I want to explain it so that you own this idea. So monetary policy means that the Federal Reserve has to be sure that there's the right amount of money, currency, around. Okay? They do that by regulating how many dollars are circulating. So, you know what a regulator is, right? Our engineers sure do. Right? It's like a thermostat, right? The temperature gets too low, we start pumping heat. Temperature gets too high, we turn it off. But this is just like, how does the thermostat work for the money presses? Which, that's what we need to know. How Elliot gets up in the morning, creates some value. We've got to figure out how the money is put into the economy. So we use, as you rightly said, the banks. And here's how the banks put the money into the economy or take it out. There's something called a reserve requirement. So, who hasn't started a bank? Say, let's start a bank. Okay, so we'll go get a bunch of depositors, get $100,000. All these rich people are going to put their money in the Snig Ron bank. Okay, so that's good. We have all this money sitting in our bank, and candidly, all it is a bunch of paper with symbols on it. Is it doing any good? No, it's just like straw sitting in the barn, not even feeding the horse. Okay, so what do we have to do to make money with our money? We got to loan it out, right? We got to loan it. Okay, so along comes Matthew says, hey, I'm gonna buy a car or whatever. So we loan the money out, we loan the money out, we loan all $100,000 out. But then Cameron, one of our depositors, sorry, Cameron, thank you for volunteering so many times. Allison, one of our depositors, comes in and said, I'd like to withdraw $10 for lunch. And we go, well, see, we got all this stuff loaned out, and so we really don't have the money right now, but it's loaned out because it's making money, and that's all good because we can pay you interest on. Well, what does Allison say? What a stupid bank. I put the money in so I can get it out when I want it. So the Federal Reserve sets a rule and says, look, Snigdon, you better keep 10% of your $100,000 there in case Allie wants lunch. Or whatever. The reserve requirement. So, how does that act like a thermostat? Well, if the Fed sets monetary policy, that's why President Trump yaks away about the chairman of the Fed, because he doesn't control him. He can appoint him or fire him, but he can't tell him what to do. Because the chairman of the Fed is running his own Dairy Queen. It's a private entity. Okay, so the Fed decides that there's just so much productivity, we got to put more money into the economy. What do they do to the reserve requirement for all the banks, including the Snigdon Bank? Are they going to increase the reserve requirement or decrease it?
Decrease.
They'll decrease it, sure. 95% reserve requirement. Okay, there's another $5,000. We loan out, and guess what? It's cash circulating around because it was loaned out. And if they want to shrink the amount of cash, the money supply, what are they going to do to the reserve requirement? They're raising 20%. We got to hold 20%, guys. Suddenly, when all the loans get paid back, what happens? We don't loan it out again. So we're just keeping it sitting there like straw in the barn. So, reserve requirement works like a thermostat based on raising and lowering. So far, so good. Currency goes into the economy. Okay, the discount rate is important because there's a rule, actually a worldwide rule for all banks, that at the end of the day, they better have enough money in there to cover the reserve requirement. And if we loaned out, let's just say Snigdon and I loaned out, so the reserve requirement is 10%, we're supposed to have 90,000, and we loaned out, we're supposed to have 10,000 reserve requirement, loan out 90,000. We only have 9,000. Oops. What are they going to do, shut us down? No, they're going to provide a way for us overnight to go to the Fed, and the Fed will print some money to give us overnight, and we'll pay some sort of interest rate for it to be sure that we're balanced up for that day. Every single day, every single bank does this all the time. Okay? So, discount rate. The discount rate plus 2% is what's called the prime rate. When the prime rate goes up, so discount rate to prime rate goes up, what happens to the amount of money in the economy? Charging more to rent the money, charging more to have it overnight. What's that going to do to people's willingness to borrow when it costs more? Yeah, so it's going to actually decrease. The prime rate goes up, there's less currency in the, okay? And when they lower the prime rate, what happens to the currency? Everybody borrows more because, yeah, dang, right? Okay, so so thermostat function number 2 is the discount rate. And then the third one is called open market operations. And it's the one that has a few more moving parts than a simple up and down, but it has the same effect. Okay, so here's what's going on. The federal government, which is not the Federal Reserve, so the USA, the Treasury. Once again, we spent more than we took in. We're going to have a way to get that money. So we go over to the Federal Reserve and say, we need to borrow some money, $1 billion. Oh, says the Fed. Well then, we'll just, and we'll give you something called a T-bill, a treasury bill, or a treasury note. And the Fed says, great, we'll buy your treasury note. And where does the Fed get the money to buy the treasury note? This is the cool part. The presses run longer. They just run it off. And the federal government gets the money. And sitting there in the Federal Reserve is an IOU called a treasury bill. And when the government borrowed money, the Federal Reserve printed it and put it into the economy. And what did that do to the money supply? It went up, right? The presses ran longer. All right, so we have these treasury bills. Now, you can't unprint money, but if the Fed wants to get money out of the economy, and it's not going to use this, and it's not going to use this, it's deciding it's going to use open market operations. It's the market for treasury bills. The Federal Reserve has $1 billion worth of IOUs from the government, and it goes out and says, you know, we'll just sell these to the public. They're called bond traders, okay, on Wall Street. But they just sell them, and then guess who buys the bonds? Well, they're the most secure thing in the world, so all the customers from the bond traders pay, you know, for the treasury bills. And what happens to the amount of money out there? It shrinks because the Fed sold T-bills. Okay, so one more time. They want to get money into the economy. They buy T-bills by running the presses longer. They want to get money out of the economy. They sell T-bills so that everybody pays their money to the Fed, and it goes and sits in the basement like straw in the barn. Okay, so 3 thermostats. Reserve requirement, up and down. The discount rate, up and down. Open market operations, the buying and the selling are counterintuitive. It means it sort of sounds backwards. When the Fed, the Dairy Queen of money, okay, wants to send money into the economy, how does it do it? With open market operations. Just try your mind out, see if it works for you. The Fed wants to send money into the economy. How does it do it with open market operations? It's going to buy treasury bills from the US government. Now, comes time, the economy is running a little hot, okay, meaning there's too much currency chasing too few goods and services. Productivity is not quite as high. How do they get money out of the economy using open market operations? They sell. And everybody puts their money in to buy those things. And they bear interest and stuff, and it's a really secure investment. So, you know, there's a market for those. Okay? All right, guys. So, now we know how it is that when Elliot gets up in the morning and decides to commercialize, he's going to do it by monetizing along this system. It's a totally logical system. And it's a system. It's got these pieces, and they work, and that's how it works. The whole economy works this way. It works this way in the EU. It works this way in Britain. It works this way in Australia. This is how it's done. Okay? So just so you know, Elliot got up in the morning, and the presses run longer because he chose a technology. Okay, we can, not going to do that. So he chose a technology. He created new value units, and that's all we're going to do in this class is, by the time we're done, we're going to use 3 skills, that can show us that we have pretty good chance it's Gertrude, the golden goose. And on the basis of that, we'll prove using logic and system, okay, very skills that are most prevalent here in this class, using logic and system, how if we choose this technology and create a product or service, it's really likely to create new value units, aka sales, aka new transactions, aka new exchanges. And then we'll work on how the cash flow comes out by selling the product or service. We raise equity, we obtain debt, but all of those are, both of those are temporary to selling the product or service, which is what we're gonna do. Okay, guys, so that's the concept for how this monetizing works. The how you raise debt is way simpler than how you raise equity.
Finally, segment 9 is a role play on raising equity. We create this role-playing experience where we can see how the social assumptions underlying equity financing work in taking an invention from inception to being a publicly traded stock. And we do this by walking through the process together and seeing how STEM students react to the decisions required by applying the social assumptions of equity financing that we talked about earlier. Through segment 9, we can see how concept can be turned into action.
And what I wanted to do for about 10 or 12 minutes is to do a what if. Let's just have somebody be the entrepreneur who creates the brand new, I don't know, business school. We have a product that's used in every business school in the world, okay? And it's called a widget. You'll hear us creating widgets all the time. It's just something. So every business school is using widgets. So, Trent, would you be the entrepreneur who's just created the super widget? Okay, so he's created the super widget. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through how it is that the super widget gets created. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. So what I'm going to ask you to do with this sheet, so this is downloadable, it's on Blackboard, so you don't need to keep the sheet. But part of us getting to know each other is that you give me feedback, and I know it's you even though I won't call you out. I just know what you're thinking, okay? So I'm going to hand out the example we're just going to use, and then if you have any questions, you just write the question in the margin. Everybody hands it back in. If somebody says, I have no questions, that's information for me too. Right? The last 5 minutes we're going to do the learning choices so that we're all on side with that. Okay, so this is the example and the answers that are going to occur. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 there, or just 2. 3, okay. 1, 2. So, any questions that I don't have time to answer, why don't you just start those all around? Okay, so this is an example of how we're going to raise equity, which is this first one, but we're creating cash flow. Okay, so here we are. There's a role play case. Trent just created the super widget, and he formed a company. Right? There's Trent. He issued 1,000 shares at $100 a share for $100,000. Why? Because that's all the money he put in to create the super widget. It includes his car, the equipment, the office furniture, everything, but Trent's got $100,000 in this deal, and his lawyer says, Trent, just 1,000 shares, $100 a share, that'll cover your $100,000. So he's the entrepreneur. Now remember, in equity, we have the laws of financing. And the laws of financing say, many times my money in exchange for control. So Trent wants to go out and get something done, but he needs to raise some money to do a prototype and to check it out. Okay, so he decides that he's going to go to the Jeffrey and Elliott company, and they are going to invest, because they know super widgets, they know Trent, they're what's called angel investors, and so they come in and they go, okay, we're gonna invest. Now, they say, so these are the numbers that back up the story. They say, hey Trent, how much do you need? Oh, $1.3 million to $1.5 million. How about $1.4 million? Sounds good. So, then he says, what percentage of my company do you want? Now, remembering the laws of financing, what percentage do you guys want? It's sitting there right in front of you. You want 70%. And Trent says, I'll only do this for many times my money.
I will only do this for many times my money.
You don't want to do it for many times his money, because those are the laws of how it works. Okay, so how do these guys, they just fork it over? No, they have an appraisal. So they go to the, just remind me of your name. Addison. So they go to the Addison Appraisal Company, and these guys say, Addison, we need an appraisal of the super widget company. And Addison, being sharp in business, knows that the underlying rule of business is buy low, sell high. I mean, seriously, everybody jokes about that, but dang, you do the other way and it's just oblivion, right? So buy low, sell high. Okay, so she says to Jeffrey and Elliott, are you buying or selling? And what do they answer?
Buying.
They're buying. Oh, she says. How much do they say they need? $1 million, $3 million, $1 million, $4 million? Oh, she says. And so, being a savvy appraiser, she comes in at, let's just say $1.2 million. Oh. Well, for instance, I'm gonna sit still for that, so he goes and hires the Krista appraisal company, who also knows the rules of business, which are buy low, sell high. And she says, are you buying or selling? And you say,
So,
selling. Oh, she says, well, does all her work. That'll be $1.6 million. Wrestle, 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 arm wrestle, etc. Oh, gee, it's $1.4 million. Okay? That comes out. But for 70%, it's actually $2 million valuation. Okay, so 70%. So this divided by 0.7 grosses up to $2 million. Okay? So what did they really appraise it at? Maybe it was $2.5 million. $2.5 million. Maybe it was $1.5 million. But comes out at $2 million. 70% comes to $1.4 million. Okay, so the question is, Trent, are you going to make the deal? Well, let's just see. He's at $100,000, and now at a $2 million valuation, he's at $600,000. Did you get many times your money? Yeah, so you're willing to give up control for these guys. Yeah, you get $1.4 million to do that. Okay, you guys are happy, right? Because you got control. Okay, so everything's worked. The test market works out great. And it's now time to do the second round. And the second round is, let's take this to several test markets and start manufacturing, etc. Well, Jeffrey and Elliott they're not asleep, man. They're awake. In fact, before they even made the investment, they went to the Amanda Allison Cameron Company and said, we got the super widget deal going, or whatever. And they said, yeah, okay, we'll be the mid-range financiers if everything goes right. So pretty soon they go over and they say, hey, everything's going right. Well, how much do you need? Well, we need probably about $5 million bucks. Okay. Well then, they say, let's just see what that company's valued at. At which point, they go to the Krista company. Krista says, are you? And they say,
Selling.
selling. Oh, buy, low, sell. Okay, so she appraises it at 12 million bucks. Okay? And then these guys go to the Brady company and say, we need an appraisal. Brady says,
Are you buying or selling?
and they say, which means buy low,
Selling.
sell high. So he appraises it at 8 million. Well, then 8 million arm wrestle comes out to $10 million valuation. And then, because you guys know you guys, you don't need 70%, you just need 50%. Now, is that 50% negotiable? Is 70% negotiable? Yeah, all this stuff is just a way of seeing how the numbers work so that we have the system become clear. Okay, so you guys say, yeah, we're gonna invest, so you get 50% control. Now, if the investment goes through, but here we go, you guys, the Jeffrey and Elliott Company, okay, so you invested, actually put in $1.4 million, it's now $3.5 million. So, does it meet the laws of equity financing? Many times your money for loss of control? Yeah, because it's going down to 50% of what you had. You had 70%, but now it's going to 35. Okay, Trent, you're going from 30% to 15%, but you're going from 600,000 to 15 to $1.5 million. You gonna do that deal? Yeah, so you see, the deal goes on, right? Okay, so the next thing to do is to do the national rollout. We need a ton of money, and to do that, we're gonna have to take the company public. I'm gonna take the company public, so the Amanda Allison Cameron Company knew the Caleb Caden Company, and long before they invested, they talked to C&K, and C&K said, yeah, you guys watch this, blah, 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 blah. And who are these guys? They have a seat, not on the New York Stock Exchange, but on the over-the-counter market. Okay, that's the place where the new IPOs are most often sold. So they know that they need to finance, and these guys say, how much do you need? And you say, well, we need somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million. Sorry. We need somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 to $35 million. Okay, so we need this number. And I go back to the appraisers, and Brady now knows that they are selling high, so he appraises at 60 million. Okay, and over here we have Callan, they gave Callan, and Callan says these guys are buying low, right? So that's, let's say 40 million. Arm wrestle, arm wrestle, arm wrestle, comes out with $50 million valuation, and then there's a public offering that occurs. Well, there's other stuff that goes on, because in the US of A, you can't just offer your shares. In fact, every time one of these things happened, it fell under the securities law. And the securities law is different than common law. Common law is innocent until proven guilty. Securities law is guilty until proven innocent. You took my money and you screwed me, and you're done. Okay, that's the law. Okay, so the only way that these deals happened was that there were disclosures that were made that fell under exceptions to public offering rules for the first two, and then you guys have to be sure that the offering goes to the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they will evaluate it using the offering memorandum. So we have business plans which say everything's coming up roses, and we have offering memorandum that says you have rocks in your head if you invest. Why? Because we told you so is the defense if you're guilty until proven innocent. So the Securities and Exchange Commission reviews it. They say it's time to go active, and they say it goes active at $5 a share. Okay, so suddenly, these guys, do they have that money? No, they got about 20 other brokers that work with them on the underwriting, and they all split it up. But if it's a firm underwriting, means that they committed the 33 1/3 million, then the moment it goes active on the stock exchange, these guys pay the company the 33 million bucks, plus the lawyers, plus the whatever. Okay? Is this public offering going to go forward? Sure. Because Trent says, I got 25 times my money, even though I only own 5% of the company. Look, it's $2.5 million bucks for 100,000. These guys say, sure, I'm gonna get 4.17 times their money. And these guys say, yeah, we went from 5 million to 8.3, that's 1.67. And so that's how an equity offering works, using the underlying assumptions of financing. Okay, so we have 3 ways the money comes in when we're doing that creative cash flow. We sell stuff, we raise equity, or we raise debt. Now that's all we're going to talk about, except for that yellow brick road. Oop, sorry, wrong direction. Except for the yellow brick road, which we talked about, and we'll ask you about that every week so that you get that ingrained in your head. But really, from here on out, it's just about valued units.
In this video, you have had the opportunity to view 9 segments that enable you to establish your own foundation for creating value that results in running the money printing presses longer. That's right, creating money, stored value. You have seen why such a foundation is needed, because without your understanding how the commercialization system works, you would be less likely to master business administration. This video provided this information. You have seen how the commercialization process, the yellow brick road, works. You have seen that the key to financial success is not necessarily for you to have the funding you need. Rather, the key is to be able to show the world that you have Gertrude, the golden goose. You have seen how the Federal Reserve Bank moves money into and out of the economy. You have seen the sources of financing and have learned the social assumptions for both debt and equity financing. Then, using a living case example, you have been able to observe the steps that occur for equity financing. With this information, you now have the foundation to take a technology that's an invention but is not yet commercialized and solve this unstructured problem using a step-by-step process of technology commercialization to release the inherent value in human relationships. As I mentioned previously, this release of value is possible because there is inherent value in human relationships, most of which does not emerge due to bad socioeconomic frictions, like sand in the gears. Thus, when we reduce these frictions, which show up as the 3 uncertainties that were explained in the integrative project orientation video, the inherent but obstructed value naturally emerges. With this skill available to us, by the end of this course, we will be enabled to make a very strong case to the Texas Tech Office of Research Commercialization, the ORC, that there are products that are likely to produce enough value that the ORC can get this technology licensed and thereby commercialized. All the best in your studies. I'd just like to add a special note of thanks to the Rawls e-Learning Center and to BA Computing Services for all the help that they've given in helping us to get the media site videos and narration all set up for the e-lectures. Thanks so much. A job well done and very much appreciated.